What's next for sustainable finance? Yes, that's the big question of the day, I think, and it's important. And they will give you the perspective, because we see that SFDR. We discussed about SFDR. The compliance is under review, and so just can I have your attention? So we see that SFDR is under review, that we have the Sustainable Investment Universe, the EU Competitiveness Policy. So we have plenty of things coming. Disclosure a bit, yes, changing, and also in the review that we go to another direction. And we will see with Kenny Panjanaden, sorry Kenny, I never could pronounce your name, and Michael Horvath. So Kenny is a partner at PwC Luxembourg in audit and assurance, also expert of sustainable finance, and Michael Horvath is a sustainability leader at PwC Luxembourg, and they will give you the perspective on how this sustainable finance is really taking another direction from compliance to strategy, operation, and so come here. Vous voulez des questions ou pas?
Thank you, Oriane. So we're still over time, what I can see here. I think this is not correct anymore. So we appreciate, Herman, the answer to the prior question. We also appreciate the colleague is not here anymore, which for us is going to be probably easier than it has been for you before. Well, it's a difficult topic.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. We have a clicker. Huh? Yes, it's a difficult topic. So, in the end, and I think you have, when you have listened to the panel before, when you have listened to what Isabel said at the beginning, there is a lot going on, and that probably is at the crux of the problem. Because if you need to have so much going on in such a topic that is actually very, very straightforward, because it's a topic about how businesses go from A to B and keep their business model intact or change it, then usually there is a problem within the system. Now, having said that, most of us are Europeans here, if not Europeans living in Europe and appreciating the European liberties, but also appreciating, obviously, Europe has one specificity, which is we are good at issuing laws, regulations, directives, recommendations, Q&As, and it doesn't stop when it doesn't stop. And that's a little bit the crux of the story and all of that. When you talk about sustainable finance, you immediately enter the regulatory area, which makes this a very, very complicated exercise. So today we look at, it's a lot, we look at 3 different topics. Obviously SFDR is something which is very important for asset managers, very important for insurance companies. These days less important for banks, because for them it's very difficult to distribute those products to the end investors. We have sitting, obviously, the EU Competitiveness Compass. Kenny has a little bit more detailed look at that. What is that? Why is this relevant in that sphere? And then we have a lot of these elephants in the room, we have the Savings and Investment Union, and we just take a look. So it's going to be, we try to keep it as high level as possible, appreciating it's challenging with this topic. So,
do we have any Americans in the room?
Excellent. So we're going to be very neutral, because we're going to be very neutral. I think it's because what you see on the slide is about, we talk a lot about regulation, we talk a lot about simplification, we talk a lot about deregulation, and we talk a lot about, and we point the fingers to our American friends saying, you guys are stepping out of different alliances, you guys are stepping out of everything. If you transport your business into the US and you are at risk of being sued, whichever way possible, you will also take a step back and you might relabel. You might think about what you have called before sustainability, you might now call it resilience. In the end, the Americans are not stupid, huh? But let's be very frank about that. They know how to make money and they know how to understand how business evolves and changes. Nevertheless, you see on the left-hand side a little bit what happened in the private space, and on the right-hand side you see a little bit what happens from a European point of view. So we know as well, and we have a look at that in a minute, that in Europe you have this discussion around simplification, which is in the end it's a Trojan horse for deregulation. That is just what that is. Now, nevertheless, and I think that's interesting for us, specifically obviously for Kenny and for me working in that space, is you have a lot of companies now coming out and saying, fair enough, there is one angle which is regulation, but there is another angle which is just talking about when I take investment decisions, I need to look at everything. And sustainability is one of the key criteria that I need to look at, because this will tell me a lot about the resilience of the business model going forward. So you have a couple of these examples on there. Obviously, the Norwegian Sovereign Fund is one of the big examples you have, but you could have read it the last couple of months that a lot, specifically of pension funds, have pulled out allocations from US managers who needed to take a step back, and they have reallocated to European managers. And there's a very, very simple reason for that, because pension funds, obviously from an investment horizon, have the longest horizon of all of the investors. So for them, sustainability risk is not something that will materialize today. For them, sustainability risk is when you are 60, they need to have your money ready. And that's the view and the challenge we have with sustainability as a whole. This is not something that you see every day. Today, beautiful weather, wonderful. It's not Luxembourg, we have sunshine outside, but you see the things happening more and more. And that's, of course, the one big challenge we have in all of that. You cannot touch it on a daily basis, which means for most decision makers, this is something that is not relevant, because changing your business, changing your processes, changing your input factors is a cost factor for them. If I have a 3 years tenure as a CEO, I might just kick this down the problem to the next guy. So this is a little bit what the thinking is behind all of that.
Yeah, and I think what we see is very much of a split narrative. So you have obviously some private players that try to look at, the cost of sustainability, and then obviously try sometimes to go short term and to try to cut some of it. But then the public supervisors who are actually integrating sustainability oversight in their supervisory priorities. The point is just how do we really get anything out of it at the end of the day? And probably we can just go to the next slide, because the data does not lie. I mean, 4 out of the 5 top risks are linked to sustainability. It's not an ESG story anymore. It's a risk management story. And a lot of times we get that very wrong, because we speak about ESG as a non-financial thing, but when I speak of risk management, it's from a financial risk perspective. And if we look at sustainability part of the strategy and we think, look, do I invest into more sustainable ways of doing things that cost much money? That's the transition cost. But these are predictable. These you can have a plan about it, and you know exactly how much it's going to cost you. What you don't know is, if you don't do anything about it, how unpredictable that is and how destructive this actually is. If we look at the figures out there, we've not used PwC-produced figures here, just so that we can be very independent. That is Munich Re's figures, and they show that the cost of inaction, so the insured losses that have hit us in the last years, is rising exponentially. If you look at the graph in 2015 to 2024, that is considerable in terms of cost of inaction out there that hits us. And then obviously you have the ECB, who spoke of, I think someone mentioned that earlier in the presentations, that if we just speak about droughts, that can wipe out 15% of GDP in the Eurozone. Now, today, people have suddenly become macroeconomic experts, and we all understand now the debt to GDP ratio, especially when we look at the neighboring countries. Just imagine what a 15% increase in debt would do to France, and that's how serious that actually gets. And so we agree that there has been a lot of regulation forced onto players, regulation that people didn't really ask for and sometimes not really adapted to the market. But at the end of the day, the cost of not doing is what explodes the business and makes your business not sustainable. And again, it's not us saying that. Auditors do hypotheses. We are sometimes wrong. Consultants even often.
Never wrong.
Yeah. But the World Economic Forum comes up with this and mention about this, and this is what we actually have to understand. The data is out there and it doesn't lie.
Maybe two small points to that. One of the big questions that we have on almost a daily basis is sustainability has been pulled out of everything. So it's standing to the side or it's standing across, but actually it's integrated. That might be one of the big challenges we had, also from a naming convention. And the second point around this, you say, well, okay, statistics, we're aware of that. There is a problem with being able to be insured. In Italy, for example, you have a new law, that is a draft out there, where they're actually saying every company needs to have a nat cat insurance, and every insurance company needs to provide that. So it's a draft, so they're going to discuss that. But the big problem you have in all of that, and that's where sustainability is lagging behind, is we are not able to model risks to financial impacts. So practically speaking, when you do a valuation of a company, you have different assumptions. You say it's going to go up, it's going to go high, it's a cash flow, it's an interest rate. We all know how that works. People understand and accept assumptions and limits to the system. In sustainability, we talk about low, medium, and high risk. Now, that's very nice, unless you can start to quantifying what is the impact on the financial statements, what is the impact on the turnover, you will always have problems getting through to decision makers because you stay in an area which is hard to quantify. Now, where are we today? And today is a moving target. We heard it today as well. So we keep this short. Some of you have seen these slides already. So that was before, more or less, the second term of Ursula von der Leyen. So you can see, and you will see it on the top slide, this is just about reports, strategy, intentions. This has nothing to do with simplification or making anybody's life easier. So all of that started already in the beginning of 2024 when a European think tank that is actually bringing together the biggest companies in Europe put out a report. And the report was labeled Competitiveness in Europe and the challenge that we as business leaders have. If you read that report and you read then a couple of months later what the European Commission has brought out, there are not that many differences between those two elements. Now, is that bad? Not necessarily, but it shows a dependency, obviously, from stakeholders. Then you had the other two reports, and you have heard about that, and they're not new. Those are problems Europe has had for a long time. One of that is the letter report, and the letter report quite simply is saying, well, yes, we have a EU of 27, but it doesn't work. Investment fund industry is one of the very, very good examples. You want to distribute a product into France? Have fun. This is going to be a challenge for you. And then you go on, and Draghi, and you have heard about that report. In the end, it's just a summary of what we had before. Then in November, this is actually where the first hit came through for the sustainability people. This was the Budapest Convention, where Ursula von der Leyen unfortunately was not quite able to keep things apart, which might also be something we need to think about when she was talking about thousands of data points that are overlapping within the regulations. There are overlaps, that's for sure. Thousands might be a lot. Then we have the Competitiveness Compass. Kenny will talk about that in a minute. We skip that. And then we go into whatever we have now, which is omnibus and simplification. We have, of course, the question of, well, rearm Europe, and how does that actually fit from an ESG perspective? There will be something tomorrow on that. It's a very interesting topic. You have seen the Commission is very much in favor of that. They have brought out big statements supporting this. And then you have, this is our equivalent of Elon Musk when he was still at Doge. This is Laris Dombrovskis. He is the simplification commissioner. And we are waiting eagerly, and I think most of you, because this topic about we change sustainability regulation for the products is hanging around for a year or more already.
The friends of the press, please don't quote that.
I think we are under friends here, so I would suppose this works. So in the end, and that's what Kenny was saying on the back end of this. So we have politics on the top. There is nothing concrete. If you read some of those proposals, 20 pages, 30 pages, in the end they're just saying, we will do something later and we will keep you informed. This is what you have. At the bottom end, and this is where I think reality sets a little bit more in, or also this is where desperation might be setting in for investment managers, banks and insurance companies, is you have the three regulators, so ESMA for the asset managers, EIOPA for the insurance companies, and EBA for the banks, as well as the ECB. They're saying, could not care less. what politics is doing. This is a topic that has systemic risks. That was one of the points the ECB raised. And then the last one, just for fun, then we have the tariff topic, which is a little bit decoupled, but you know the poor penguins. So if you look at that, and we're talking about a topic which is rather straightforward. Sustainability is not that complicated in essence. This is the core of the problem. We talk for more than a year, 1.5 years, about we need to change something. And in the middle, what we have not shown you is what has happened on the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSDDD, the back and forth, the bargaining and all of that, which means most of the clients and the people we talk to are a little bit fed off with this because it just takes away from the substance of all of that.
And maybe just a point on the tariffs. Maybe we would potentially think that there's only retaliation coming out of Europe. But if you've ever heard of the CBAM, that is actually a much fancier word for tariffs that we Europeans use. So if we just go to the next slide, basically. So we just do a quick deep dive on one of the topics, the competitiveness compass. The way that you have to see the competitiveness compass is a little bit the financial engine of the Green Deal. And that's actually an initiative that can make Europeans dream again. I am extremely connected to this competitiveness compass. I've read a lot of it, read a lot of all the consultations that went into that. It's explained over 3 different pillars. And if you look at it structurally, it's exactly what Europe would need based on, obviously, the recommendations of the Draghi report. Now, if you'd ask Draghi if this is, answering to the report that he's done before summer, he'd probably say not enough. But if you drill down the report, there is actually some very good takeaway from that. So the first pillar is about closing the innovation gap. Now, all of it is linked to sustainability in a way or the other. That's going to be up to us to try to show you how this is actually easing sustainability in Europe. The closing of innovation gap, it's about acknowledging that in Europe, we have the science, we have the research, the talents, obviously. But then when it comes to scaling up, this is where we have failed miserably in the last years, or at least based on our potential, we have failed miserably. Our top founders find themselves, lured into US citizenship and very good packages in Asia. This is where we lose them. This pillar 1 is created around supporting startups in the European Union, easing mobility and creating a funding. And Europe tries to build on sustainability as being a strategic lens to create the new companies of tomorrow. Europe's success will be how we've adapted to sustainability and not in spite of sustainability. Try to create competitiveness through that. The second point is the joint roadmap for decarbonization. And here again, I don't have to explain anything. It's very much in the name. It's trying to find out a way that the decarbonization of the European companies would actually help Europe be competitive rather than not be competitive and have more costs. And there was a question from you earlier about carbon credits, and the way we have designed all of our regulation in Europe today might make it, difficult to get that onboarded. But I am looking forward into the competitiveness compass that this is a topic that can actually emerge. And if you look at the consumption of or the emission of greenhouse gas emissions in the whole world, potentially Europe might be one of the very few continents who would, at the end of the day, have issued less and be able then to offset that. But that's a little bit of wishful thinking. I'm pretty sure that we will come back to some reality to that. The third part is reducing excessive dependencies and increasing security. I think we have understood now how defense, how rearming Europe is prominent to ensure that we are resilient, trying to reduce the dependencies that we have on other countries, which would potentially mean that we are a bit freer on our sustainability journey, on our decarbonization journey, on our net zero journey, if this can still be an objective. and increasing security. That's the whole initiative around defense. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mirova is speaking at the end of the day. I'm sure they are going to tell a very good story about defense investing in the concept of ESG. There's a lot of it that actually makes sense. We should just try to get away from our bias that defense means go in there and slaughter armies. It's much more strategic than that. And this package is going to obviously try to make a difference about it. And we're speaking of roughly 470 billion euros. And that's probably going to give us a chance in our competitiveness journey against the other massive continents.
So this is more or less, it's a 25-piece paper which gives you a view of how does Europe want to spend money. This is all this is. So far, we have not seen too much action on that. We just take it apart a little bit, the left-hand side, because how do we think about sustainability in that? And how do we think about investment priorities? So you have, and just for you to understand kind of the competitiveness compass, that's the North Star. That's the map. And then you have under the map, you have things like Clean Industrial Deal and you have the Savings and Investment Union. So in the end, Clean Industrial Deal is talking about what do we need to do to decarbonize, to be good on biodiversity, to be good on circular economy. And the Savings and Investment Union should answer the question, well, where's the money coming from? So those are how those two things hand together. So you have, and again, those topics are not surprising. We talked about it, you talked about it before, energy and infrastructure transition. There is still a big push into hydrogen. You have, nevertheless, at least one interesting topic. Circular economy is clear. The European Union has a big target on that. And the simple reason for that is we don't have natural resources. It's very simple. Now, this is not about being very good citizens. It's about being logical and reasonable about that. If we reduce dependencies, we need to make sure we have more circularity in that. And then I think the last one on this, the lead markets and public procurement, it's a complicated topic, but in the end, what are we trying to say? We're trying to say, if you look at green steel, for example, you can make green steel or you can make normal steel in the end. If you look at the price that it takes you to produce green steel, it's significantly higher than normal steel. So in the end, the companies are saying in Europe, and rightfully so, if I'm competing globally on that product, I'm always going to lose just on price, because this is a commodity, it's a price question. So the answer that Europe needs to have on this is actually to say, fair enough, we understand that, we actually want to help you. We want to bridge that gap. And this is what's called lead markets and public procurement. That means in practice that the European Union will be subsidizing those elements. Where they think this is a technology or this is a product of the future, they will be stepping in and providing those subsidies. And then on the right-hand side, and we keep this very, very short because it's very, very technical as well, the most important thing is the question about pensions. That's the most important thing in Europe in general. No? We all know, most of us know, there is a challenge on who will get state pension at what point in time. And there's a very simple logic behind that. At a certain point in time, portion of my salary, portion of your salary will automatically be enrolled in pension schemes, which means they have a huge inflow of money. If we go back to the initial statement that I made, investors with the longest time horizon are pension funds and pension companies, which means they will automatically embed sustainability, which will drive different considerations for the asset management industry. And then you bring everything down together, and that was what Kenny has said before. The funny thing about innovation and scaling is, and sustainability is one of the great areas around that, we will need to come up with new solutions we did not have before. Now, if you look at the number of patents that we have in Europe in comparison to Asia and the US, we're better than them. But we don't have the link between university, public financing, and private financing. And this is then afterwards combined with the problem, if I have a product that is sitting in Luxembourg, I cannot freely access the EU of 27. I might need to go country by country. If you go to the US, you have 250 million as customer ad hoc. And that's the big difference that you have. And again, you can see these are all intentions for the time being. They have understood the problem, but the challenge will be on actually transforming this into actionable items.
Yeah, and I think most importantly for the Savings and Investment Union, this is where Luxembourg has probably a bigger role to play than for the Clean Industrial Deal, even if We have a lot of great corporates here in Luxembourg. But the Savings and Investment Union is going to probably enable Luxembourg to showcase again to Europe what we can actually do from a product governance perspective and from a sustainability perspective for sure, because pension funds are, irrespective of what President Trump say, they are extremely bullish on sustainability. As we said earlier, it's a question of risk management for them, and they can't even afford not to look at the factors. The other potential issue, and that is not for the sustainability guys to solve. Yeah, give us a break. We've been solving a lot of problems for the past years. Is a tax issue, tax harmonization issue in the whole European Union, which will be able then to ensure that the European Lambda citizen is able to get into a pension product that makes sense. So until then, we have to follow up on that topic and try to position the product governance, the product strategies out of Luxembourg to be able to serve the huge market when it comes to SIU.
So we're changing a little bit course from no subsidies, no tax incentives, no support. Business needs to transform itself to actually, let's try to help. Well, it's the elephant in the room. It has been for quite some time. Considering where SFDR is sitting, EU taxonomy, CSRD, CSDDD, my goodness, I think nobody wants to change places with whoever is holding the pen on this one, because you probably can only go wrong. You will have on the one hand side people saying, my goodness, why did you change? I have all my templates ready. I can push out my products the way they are. If they're good or not is a different point of discussion. Then you will have others saying, you're not going far enough. Others will be saying, you have not solved the problems that we have. So it's kind of, it feels a bit like a no-win situation, which is unfortunate. Obviously, the challenge being this has also been hanging around quite a lot of times. So Kenny, maybe you want to pick product categorization? It's your favorite topic.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we know we're heading most probably to a labeling regime. People have heavily criticized the setting around which we have created the first transparency regime, and we are going to most potentially get there. There was the proposal of the Platform of Sustainable Finance that came last year in December, a good read. And then obviously a lot of the discussions that are happening, we hope to hear in November. 2 dates are up in the air, 19th or 29th, whichever is going to be in November. And we've seen that in the last couple of months, the Commission tries not to be delayed on these topics. I'm not going to speak about which categories we're going to look at, but you obviously know that we're speaking a lot of sustainable, of transition, a debate around whether impact would be or not introduced, a heavy lobby when it comes to that, but you could also fit it in one of the different categories, and then an unclassified. What we know is that we're expecting to have a raised bar when it comes to minimum safeguards. And this is going to continue to be important, but it gets back to the point that we were saying earlier. It's not about how you want to package your products. This is not going to be important in the second wave of SFDR, as it wasn't in the first either, because we've seen a lot of downgrades and upgrades which were really not worth the pain of overclaiming certain things. So I think the practitioners have got to the point that it's about what we actually want to do, what you actually want to develop, and building your whole strategy around that. Ahmed uses a word that is fitting. It's the philosophy and how you, what story you tell with the philosophy. It's more about that. It's more about how you manage risk. It's then about how you market. But this is just the tip of the iceberg at the end of the day. It's really how you build your product. Is your product going to be sustainable in the future? Does that answer to demands of the market? This is where we believe today there is a maturity on the market when it comes to thinking around that.
So that's it from us. Very last remark. Transition is not limited to climate or environment. Just that I have said that as well, because that's the only thing we talk about. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Kenny has time for one question, if anybody has a question.
That's good. I think we have 2 minutes, so.
Thank you very much for your very insightful presentation. I'm Charles from EcoTrack Solution. We are trying to create data from countries in Africa. So my question is to understand how, I've seen that you have now the ACID2 and the CSAD. So you have a framework in Europe. How can you ensure that it's reliable with, let us say, upstreaming suppliers from global south, for example, like Africa? How can you ensure that it's reliable and compatible with your data in Europe, for example?
Yeah. I think the question is good. People often misunderstand how SFDR was built. It's extremely proprietary in terms of what you want to achieve. The only part of SFDR that is not proprietary, it is your do not significant harm test. That is the second pillar of being a sustainable investment. And there, it's how you actually explain your whole story. It's not prescriptive, right? The Commission does not prescribe, I mean, today at least, what you should be calling a sustainable investment. But at the end of the day, whatever you build, whatever you construct has to make sense for the investors that are asking for it. And obviously you have to respect the regulation and making sure that you have a fit for market approach and that it is compliant with the regulation and that you're not telling any fallacious stories or a little bit far-fetched stories. But it's a proprietary regime. It's really how you built it. Just be conscious that whatever you would consider to be a sustainable investment should not have an adverse impact on other objectives that could be relevant on an environmental or social perspective.
Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Michael. That was really great. Thank you very much.